Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Declan Lynch, and I am the low brass product specialist here at Buffet Crampon USA. And we are here at Thursday on the Buffet New York showroom page for another hashtag Together at Home webinar episode, obviously presented by Buffet Crampon USA. Joining me are two amazing people that I'm very excited to sit down with today. Mark Fisher and Jeremy Muller, the principal and assistant principal of the Lyric Opera Orchestra of Chicago. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to have the two of you here. It's a pleasure. And if you were joining us for the first time, or perhaps a return viewer, you may know that we tried to do this already. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had these two fine gentlemen here, and Zoom gave us a couple difficulties. So I'm very happy to be here with them and being able to put this on and getting the show going. So gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Declan.
Nice to be able to do it, being able to hear you this time.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, I thought I might have to learn some sign language here or there so we can really get it going. But thankfully, with technology, we were able to figure it out. So again, if you are joining us for the first time, I don't know what you've been doing. You must have been living under a rock because we've been doing these since the beginning of the pandemic. We broadcast these episodes every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time here on the Buffet Crampon New York showroom page. So if you haven't seen any of these before, there's actually a cool log that we'll have on the Facebook page of all the past interviews we've done. We also have a YouTube page where we've been housing all of these interviews, which is our Buffet Crampon USA Rhapsody Live YouTube page. You can go there and find every interview that we've done since March with all of our fantastic and amazing artists. So please check that out and drop a like and subscribe on some of the videos. We really appreciate it. And as I said, we do these every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And next week, we'll be hosting clarinet artist Caroline Hartig, who is the professor of clarinet at The Ohio State University and past president of the International Clarinet Association. She will be talking with our amazing woodwind product specialist, Matt Vance, about the R13 and all of the wonderful benefits of that instrument, as well as all of the great things that the International Clarinet Association does. So please make sure to join us then next week, Thursday at 2 p.m. right here. So getting into it again, thank you gentlemen so much for being here. I know these are not necessarily the best times, but I really appreciate you being here today. So we started this in the beginning of the pandemic. You know, we started out of a necessity to want to connect with everybody and really find out what our artists and the amazing people out there have been up to. So what have you two gentlemen been up to during the pandemic? What have you been up to keep yourself busy?
Go, Mark.
Well, it's certainly interest and motivation has waxed and waned over the last 7 months, as it has for every one of us. Musically speaking, for me, a lot of teaching online. I have 10 students at DePaul University, incredible trombone studio, really crazy strong students. You know, you're looking at this music they're preparing and you hear them in these sound files that they send you, and you kind of get to studio class and you're saying, I hope I don't have to demonstrate because I don't think I can really play it better than you can. So you just say what you can. And just so proud of those guys. And doing a lot of teaching online, private teaching that I normally don't have the opportunity to do during my regular schedule. So that's been really enjoyable. Get to meet a lot of new people and some international people. And that has kind of spurred lately into doing some more private lessons online with other brass instruments, which again, I don't often have the occasion to do. I do maybe a little bit of that at school, but much more rarely. And that's been really interesting, not only proving that good concepts, hopefully are good concepts. They work for all instruments, but also learning specific quirks and tendencies of, high brass and tuba that are maybe not endemic to trombone or euphonium. So that's been really cool. And playing wise, just trying to, start with the B flat scale every day and go from there. And, my schedule has ranged from not playing for 10 days and then, finding some motivation and having a couple of really nice weeks and just like a total roller coaster. Lately, I think all the teaching has spurred me to kind of start coming up with some content for what I hope will be a professional Facebook page, with which I'm going to try to put some playing tip videos out there, some pedagogy tips, maybe some playing demonstrations, or maybe just play some fragments of some pieces that are favorites of mine, and just to kind of develop a little bit more of online presence. I am by no means much of a marketeer, and really behind in terms of self-promotion, which I don't really do much of, but that's kind of fun to do. And I think given what I'm guessing is gonna be kind of a direction, at least for Jeremy and me and our orchestra and a lot of different orchestras, I think the future, whenever COVID passes us, I think it's going to have a lot of opportunity attached to it and a lot of exciting things, but it's going to look really different. And I expect for the bulk of my current position and job, it may look quite different. So I'm just kind of hopefully setting myself up to enjoy more variety and new and hopefully exciting things after COVID on all levels, both playing and teaching. So just kind of trying to set the stage for that, and getting a little bit more of an online presence together is something I'm going to be focusing on the next couple months.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's I can absolutely sympathize with the some days I'll get to work and be really motivated to pick up a horn, and then there'll be a month or so where I am the opposite. So, and I think that's a lot of people, especially sitting at home trying to figure out how to practice. Jeremy, what about you?
Fairly similar. I think for me, it's musically, it's been pretty quiet, unfortunately, but part of that was just timing. I had a teaching position at Northern Illinois University for the last 9 years, and I really enjoyed it, but living downtown and teaching in DeKalb and trying to sneak it into my schedule had always worked, but it finally, for the last couple of years, started to feel like maybe it was time to either find other things to do or give myself that day off instead of spending it driving 4 hours and teaching 8 hours kind of thing on the one free day. So in January, I resigned that position. 2 months later, everything else is shut down. And the one job I would be doing right now no longer is mine. So because of it, it's just sort of meant that haven't been doing much teaching at all once the semester ended in May. I did a brass quintet concert with some of the members, the Lyric Orchestra, and some other members from around town playing with the Chicago Philharmonic. It was in a parking lot behind a performing arts center in Skokie, Illinois. And it was a really good group. It was a very, we kind of put together a real standard program because we also had to find interesting ways to rehearse. So we had 2 rehearsals in a garage at one of the trumpet players' houses. And then a front yard concert with a bunch of, which actually Mark played as well, and Michael Mulcahy and Gene Picorni was there. It was a whole group of members of the CSO Lyric, and then local amateurs and high school students. It was a big it was an interesting group of musicians.
The level is quite.
It was interesting, and no rehearsal, and then a 60-minute program of all 4th of July music. So it was fun. I can't say it was the tightest program any of us have ever played, but it was a blast, and the audience loved it. But those are the 2 programs I've played since March 8th. Practice wise, for some reason, I have stayed at least sort of personally motivated just to stay in shape.
Mm-hmm.
I think after we got out, they shut us down on March 13th. It was Friday the 13th, of course. And I think we were 2 weeks away from starting our ring cycles. So I imagine all of us in that pit were at the best shape of our lives. And so to go home that day, no, we weren't going to play the ring. I took maybe 2 or 3 days off. And the next day I picked up my horn. It felt pretty good. So I was like, okay, I'll stay in shape. The next day that I played a little bit, it just felt terrible. And I realized, like, what, if I don't play a little bit every day, the days when I pick it up and it feels terrible, it'll just make things that much worse. Mm-hmm. And so I can't say that I am proud to admit that I've done most of my practicing in front of ESPN. Even just to do 45 minutes or an hour of just basic, real slow, basic, lip slurs and flexibility stuff and some etudes and some exercises, maybe play a random solo I haven't played. And if that's all I do each day, I have at least felt like I'm in shape. But there's days where you kind of go, yeah, but why? Probably my next performance might be in June. Mm-hmm. At that point. It's just none of us know, really anything as far as when we'll be playing again. So in a way, it's been sort of interesting to have time. I don't think necessarily time that any of us planned for, but a time where we all of a sudden had a lot of free time to do things that maybe we wouldn't normally do. Especially considering we were all mostly confined to our homes for a few months there at the beginning. Yeah. So I just, kind of interesting things that have happened along the way that I don't know would have happened. I ended up losing a bunch of weight. I jumped on the Peloton about 6 days a week.
You might be the only person who can say that in all of America, or maybe even the world right now. I lost weight during the pandemic.
I've lost 15 pounds since March.
Wow.
Which certainly wasn't expecting to in February. But it was like, okay. And then I'll lift him up to show, but this has been the other.
And the puppy is joining us.
The puppy. So this is
yes,
Hamilton. So he's the new addition to the family. He's a 4-month-old golden doodle.
My goodness.
And he has kept me honest and busy, right? And I just woke him up, so he's a little startled.
Oh, come on. How could you?
He was napping. But he, all of a sudden, I'd wake up every morning at 7:30 to have to take somebody outside to use the bathroom. And all of a sudden, not going to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning, watching movies all night. I have to keep on a normal human schedule. So that part has at least kept me busy. But besides, obviously missing playing, I don't think any of us wanted a break, but I guess in some way, there's been times where you kind of feel like, well, having a little bit of a break of our normal crazy schedules hasn't been terrible. I don't think anyone would have wanted it to be for a year and a half, but that's, just where things are. So.
Yeah, and finding the little bits of optimism and positivity there seem to be pretty key for everything going on. And I don't think I mentioned it before, but for everybody tuning in, make sure that you tell us where you are and you chime in with some comments and questions for these fine 2 guys right here. We'll be stopping periodically to check out who's in the comment section and see what everything's going on. And right now we have 2 fantastic people chiming in. Dan Morris, hey, Deck, Mark, and Jeremy, thanks so much, Dan, for being here. Really good to hear from you. And Ben Myers, our Midwest Division Manager, chiming in saying, hey, Mark and Jeremy. Hey, Ben, how's it going? Thanks so much for being here.
Ben.
Hey, Ben.
So kind of going off what we were all just talking about, I have to start it off, I have a couple questions about really the teaching situation with Mark specifically about, overcoming that technology barrier. I think as brass players, our approach to especially audio recording on just a laptop or a computer, or even getting the bell in the right direction to make sure that the microphone is picking it up in a good way can be more of a challenge than it seems for a lot of other folks. So what has it been like for you, especially with a studio of 10 people that's pretty substantial?
Yeah. Well, it was a quick learning curve, much of which I was relying on the students to figure out the technology and then teach me, and then hope to teach Charlie, although that's a whole different learning curve most of the time. I love you, Charlie, but Charlie is probably less interested in technology even than I am, and that's really low to begin with. So yeah, our students have been very patient with us. And so, yeah, it's been kind of cool to figure out some of the nuances with Zoom, but also, play around with different toys and mics and stuff. I've found out some new settings that really enhance the audio quality on Zoom, and it really helps for instruments as well. And then I've been hardwiring to my modem with this 75-foot cable here, and that's really enhanced it as well. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the actual teaching process and, continuing a sense of development and momentum with the students, once we kind of got used to the format, I have to say that hasn't been any different. Nothing is like being in person, but I think once we kind of got used to it, it really wasn't affecting our progress at all. And, I think the best students or the best players are going to find inspiration to work and to still get stuff done with or without the conditions that we're under now. So, the strong and the weak tend to separate themselves the same regardless of the moment or the format. Yeah.
So is there any kind of in-person anything that you guys are doing, or is everything, like even class-wise, is everything just strictly online?
We were given the option to in-person or online private teach. Mm-hmm. And we both chose to be online. But, our studio class and trombone choir, any chamber music, there is nothing allowed at DePaul right now. I think that's kind of indicative of where the lawmakers are in Chicago and Illinois. They've been, I think, more strict than in other states and other cities. Obviously, the big urban centers are more strict than the rural areas. But yeah, I think the university has set pretty strict guidelines. And to my knowledge, it's paid off. We have not had a lot of student community positive test cases, and I hope that remains. And students have been very vigilant. We have brand new music facilities at DePaul, and they are just mind-blowingly good. They're incredible. And that building has been open for the students to practice. But yeah, no ensembles of any kind, no classes, all online. And yeah, we're figuring it out, and it's what we have.
Mm-hmm. So switching things over now, my question will shift to you, Jeremy. So I think seeing, going online and on Facebook or even reading in the news about a live performance of any kind is you're almost taken back now, because we've been so, detached from everything going on that seeing one of those is almost like oh my gosh, that's actually happening. So even for an outdoor concert where it's socially distanced, what goes into that, I was reading something today about, somebody going to the opera house or anywhere, any live concert, and you don't necessarily think about the guy at the ticket counter or the guy at, opening the door or anybody like that. So for all of those different moving parts and pieces for the Chicago Phil Brass Quintet concert a couple weeks ago, what goes into something like that, especially or even rehearsal wise?
I was actually shocked the day of the concert how much work they had done to set up. The quintet itself. We just through emails decided that that made the most sense to rehearse on the two consecutive Sundays leading up to the Sunday concert. And we could do it at Bill Denton's house, who's our trumpet player at Lyric and in Chicago Philharmonic. And that part was, that part was sort of the easy part, just getting the five of us together and rehearsing. The performance day, it was really incredible. They had roped off or had spray painted little rectangles on the pavement, 6 feet apart. And so everybody could just stake their own little plot in front of a little elevated stage that they put together. They were really good about social distancing, and the employees, everybody working for the orchestra. It was really well done. It's crazy to look out and see that's what has to be done right now to hold a concert. You're glad they're taking that kind of precautions. But I mean, it's just, the day of just being able to set up shop and play a brass quintet concert just seems so foreign. For me, I went into it kind of thinking, well, this will be fun. And luckily it was a really good group of players. Matt Gaunt on tuba is a fantastic tuba player, and I've played with Matt for years in a couple of different groups. And I was shocked how quickly in the rehearsal, I think it was just I think it was like the last chord in one of the Bach contrapunctus or something we were playing, and we just held the chord and we released, and all five of us just went, oh, like just a chord. It was like, yeah. Yes. And I didn't it made me realize how much I'd missed it. And I said something in the performance. So a couple of us got up and spoke during the performance, just sort of to introduce the next few different pieces. And I made the comment that we had realized that for any of us in the group, that the last time we had performed was March 8th. And besides the front yard concert with the big fun, program there, but as far as real serious concert. And I can't remember what I was saying, to the audience, but all of a sudden I found myself a bit emotional, just because it kind of struck me that it has been, 8 months, 7 months, standing in front of, anybody playing anything. And it was nice that it was a really good group, because I think it would have been a bit of a letdown if it was still tough. You're outdoors. It was October in Chicago, so we got lucky and had about a 65-degree day. The weekend before on Sunday, it had been 50 and windy, so it could have been worse. But not ideal concert situation, but it was really just nice just to play with some people to make some music. And I think in the end, the part I hadn't really sort of thought about too much in the rehearsals was just the audience reaction. And for us thinking, in a way, like we rehearsed it thinking, here's another concert. And yet the audience reaction to what maybe 2 years ago, this type of program, which wasn't necessarily a groundbreaking program for a brass quintet per se, in any normal circumstance, I just didn't think the audience would react that way. And to them, it's, you realize, no, they haven't seen a live concert since March as well. So, I mean, it was ended up being a lot more special than I sort of anticipated. So I was glad I had a chance to do it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And even now, just the idea of just playing a chord with a couple other musicians sounds like the greatest thing in the world.
Putting my horn in the case took me a few extra seconds, remembering how certain things went. I was looking at my case going, oh, the mouthpiece here and the water bottle here. It was the weirdest thing. Just something that's as as ordinary as that 6 months ago, just felt so foreign. So I said something to my girlfriend before I walked out. I was like, I'm nervous, and for that type of concert, it was just sort of So it was fun, but yeah, I was glad it worked out.
That's awesome. And pausing real quick, we have Kristen Moore, who's one of our folks up at Powell Flutes in Boston, chiming in. Hello from Boston, and she's a DePaul flute grad, so chiming in, with some props to DePaul. Oh, the days, she says, when the flute studio was next to the trombone studio. If I had $1 for every time I heard the Valkyrie. So
I'm sorry.
Well, don't be sorry for if that's what you have to listen to every day. And I think it could get a lot worse.
That drove her to her new position.
So she can credit you on her resume for sure then. So Kristen, really, it should just be a thank you. So Well, awesome. So, kind of digging into the nitty gritty. So, both of you are Antoine Courtois performing artists. Both of you are playing on our horns. So, and both of you have been involved with this brand for many more years than I have been here. So, please tell us all about what the process was like and what kind of where you first got introduced to the brand. I know that there's maybe some ties. Like, for example, I know Jeremy, you studied with John Marcellus, who's also an artist for us and things like that. But Mark, your journey there may be different. But at the same time, both of you, if those that are chiming in don't know, both of them became artists for us at the same time, along with John Schwalm, who was the bass trombonist at the time. So I will leave it up to the two of you to decide, Mark or Jeremy, who would like to kind of start the story.
I think it was Al. It was Al introduced both of us even to the idea at what was it? Drinking a beer after. Was that Jorgen's? Whose performance was that? Someone was doing a recital.
I think Jorgen was in town, but I remember kind of the first sort of official conversation was that we were rehearsing at a church with this fantastic trombone choir here in Chicago that I formed a number of years ago, and Jeremy and I both play in now. It's called the Chicago Trombone Consort. Great group. And
if you have quick pause, if anybody tuning in has not listened to that CD, do not stop immediately what you're doing right now, because we still have a lot of cool things to talk about. But the first thing you do after this is over is please stop whatever you're going to do and listen to that CD. It is really something to listen to. So
it's a killer group. Yeah, it's so fun. And we were preparing a concert, and we were rehearsing in a church. And, I think at the time it was Tim and Al. And, I think you guys had just signed the Met section on to play the horns. And so there was a little bit of a buzz nationally about, what's going on out in New York. And so we were open to at least trying the stuff, and I had known about Courtois, but I know that the company had made a lot of changes and really had invested a lot of R&D into creating a product that was going to indeed appeal to the American player, or in this case, maybe American orchestral player. And I had always thought that they were nice horns, but in this country, it's, Bach and Edwards, or Bach, Edwards and Shires, and has been for a long time. So we've always played what we played. And so Al and Tim came to this church with just, they would bring 6 horns in and then go get another 6 and then another 6. And it was like a candy store. And it was fascinating. I have to know that they picked out very carefully the horns that they first handed us. They must have chosen those specially, because they were clearly the best of the group. But we all played them, and it was, usually you play a horn, it's like, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't respond like mine does. And it was at least equal to, if not kind of fascinating and intriguing. And it's like, okay, let me try another phrase. And then that led us to kind of go up on this stage and play some trios together. And the other guys were out front listening. And across the board, it was like, you both sound individually better than your own horn. And when you play as a section, the section on the Courtois horns that you've never played before sounds better than your regular horns, color, matching, intonation, everything. And that's the way it felt. And it was basically, let's talk about a relationship from that moment. So it was a pretty easy decision. And, again, I'd played Courtois at maybe ITFs or, some sort of occasion like a big conference, but had never really given, you know, kind of serious shakedown of the brand. And that was a quick and easy decision after that night.
It was interesting because we had just recorded that CD, and Mark and John and I, the section at the Lyric Opera had done the Pergolesi trio on that CD, and I think that was probably my second year with the section, maybe third, but it was still relatively early. And yeah, all three of us played different horns, different companies, different setups, and it's just what we all felt good on. And I know there are sections that like to all play the same instruments and feel that's really important as far as all having the exact same sound. I don't think we ever felt like that was necessary if the three instruments we were playing on sounded good together. Like, who cares if it's the exact same horn? If we sound good, then great. And I felt like we always had done a nice job of that. And yeah, they brought in these instruments. And the one thing I remember that I tell people though is that Mark and I started off on each other's trombones because I was playing a Thayer valve. And so I just immediately gravitated towards the Thayer valve 420, and Mark was on a Hagman, and so, and a Greenhoe. I think you were on a Greenhoe, and so he went to the Hagman valve, and so we started. We're just playing. We started playing the trios, and yeah, we all actually. I think one of us even said, "Boy, it's really too bad we didn't have these instruments that we've never played before 2 weeks ago when we recorded that CD." Because it actually did balance and blend better. But it was probably, what, a week or two later, and one of the guys in the group, Joseph Rodriguez, who's now down in Cincinnati, he actually said, you know, Jeremy, Mark, let me hear something really quick. You guys switch instruments, because Jeremy's on a Thayer valve on top and Mark playing on a slightly more compact valve with the Hagman on second. Let's see what happens if you swap them. So we're like, okay, take our mouthpiece out, switch it. Played maybe a couple phrases, and we both looked at each other and went, I'm cool keeping this one if you are. And went, yeah, I am too. And that was it. So we just swapped horns that day. It was like, you're cool? Oh, okay, cool, I'm done. And that was how it, so, and then it was even more that case of just, you know, the blend, sort of the sounds. Yeah, we were always just shocked how quickly it came together, how quickly it felt comfortable. Yeah, we did wish that we'd had those instruments a few weeks earlier than that, but it's been very comfortable. I not long after that same friend Joseph, you know, was playing and was even. I mean, I have friends that have asked me, they're like, if you ever get rid of this horn, I want to buy it. And so it was as Mark said, it was an easy decision to you know. Some of you maybe feel pressure because of, you know, getting a job in a section that wants you to play certain instruments, and this was just kind of wild that. Our first thought of trying them out was, sure, why not? And within a day of playing them, we're like, mine. Can't take this away from me. And so it's, you know, I've got an alto from them. We've used tenors. A lot of times when we're playing, say, Mozart and stuff, I'll use an alto. Mark will go down to one of the jazz horns. So we, you know, kind of really compact, and we just always find that the balance and blend works so nicely on pretty much any setup we use. So I think we're both very happy from day one, and so yeah, it's been.
Yeah, this infamous church day that I've heard so many things about, you know, and doing my notes for today's episode from Al and Tim, you know, I was really looking forward to hearing about it. So that's really cool. You know, you mentioned, Mark, you know, the method just signed on, and then Jeremy, you mentioned, you know, we were playing on our own different things, you know, just the classic American horn. The things that I always talk with people at shows about are, you know, what the horns are, you know, they'll pick them and say, oh, it's really good for this, or, oh, I really like the way it does this, or maybe if I played this piece on it, or different things like that. So for an opera orchestra section, going from something that is much more American to something that is, you know, more or less kind of the opposite, what was it about the instruments specifically that kind of made it really worth, you know, or kind of made the decision for you to switch?
Yeah. Well, I remember when we had played the Courtois horns for a while, a couple of weeks. And, you know, it's interesting. Whenever I've been asked to play test various manufacturers' horns, and I think this has really happened over about 30 years. You know, somebody will invite you to play a new instrument. They'll send you something and you'll play it for a couple of days, and you know it's kind of intriguing. You take it down to work and you're like, no. And you know that it happens most of the time where you get it in the section and it's like an absolute no, this isn't going to work. Usually the short honeymoon at home does not equal the play test at work in the section. And that's where I think the Courtois were very unique. They worked, I think, for me personally and then professionally in the section because I've always described my Courtois horn as kind of the sound of the Bach that I used to play, but with the ease of response of, let's say, an Edwards, which, you know, the Bach sound has always been very classic in America and particularly in Chicago. And the Edwards horns are built in such a way that they're just super efficient, easy, and just a pleasure to just play. They play easy. And my Courtois horn is kind of the blend of those two characteristics. So I obviously really, really enjoy that. But for us, I think putting our horns together in the opera, we have a massive theater, about I think 37 or 3,800 seats, and it is I think a uniquely very warm sounding theater, not because of its size, but because of its makeup and its shape. And so we need something with a lot of really nice, exciting colors in the sound to be able to balance and cut through the warmth and the size. Our theater warms everything. So we needed something with just a lot more exciting highs than I can remember a horn providing me to really complement that theater sound. And I think these horns do a great job. So, you know, recently Jeremy was referring to this ring that we were rehearsing, and we made some orchestra recordings of the ride that they would pump out through speakers on the street in Chicago in front of the Opera House, just to kind of lure people into, you know, looking at a poster or buying a ticket or whatever it may be. And so, you know, every time you go to work, you hear yourself playing the ride on the sidewalk, which is pretty cool.
That's a heck of a way to walk to work in the morning.
That's how everybody should go to work.
Exactly.
But, you know, every time I hear it, I'm like, wow, that sounds great. It's got a lot of cut to it. Who is that? Oh, it's us. So, yeah, I mean, kind of from that moment, getting him to work, testing him out in the pit, and, you know, all the repertoire that we've played since that time, which is an enormous variety, you know, it stands up to everything that we play. It's a great, very versatile horn.
I remember one quick side note, but I remember that remember John Schwam getting together and playing with Charlie Vernon at one point while he was still in town, and John came back to work and said, "Oh yeah, Charlie was playing my Courtois," and Charlie said, "Man, this is real easy to play. I can see why you like it." And it was like, yeah. They're easy to play. And sometimes people almost say like it's a bad thing. Like, oh, it's so easy to play. Like, is it supposed to be? Am I looking for a hard instrument to play? But that was kind of the same thing for me that I always mention is just color. And it's another one of those parts of, at least for my own personal story when I started on the instrument, that it just was so obvious. I was playing for a very discerning violinist with my old instrument and the new Courtois, and I was going back and forth, and I just would play a little bit of this solo on my old instrument and then on the Courtois, and just out of curiosity what they were hearing out front, because I had the Courtois maybe a week, if even that long, And I felt like I liked it, but I was curious what someone that was not a trombone player, that didn't work for the company, that would be sitting out front would tell me, you know. And so I remember playing the first page of the Grandal, and on my old horn and then on the new horn. And the thing that she said that was so interesting, she said, well, first of all, your new horn makes your old horn sound like a student model. And she goes, but she said, what's interesting is I can hear you trying new things as you're playing because the colors. And as she said that, I realized, no, you're right, because there were things I was doing, phrasing, that it was just like, oh, sort of doing little things that I hadn't really done, because the horn was sort of letting me do things. And I'd been playing on the trombone before that. I loved my Edwards. I don't mean any, they make some beautiful instruments. The one particular that I bought in college, I'd played on it for 11 years. I don't think that by the time I got to Lyric, if I was going to be shopping at Edwards, I would have bought the same instrument, because I needed a different instrument at that point in my playing than I did 11 years before that. But it was my instrument. I felt comfortable on it. I had won the position on it. I felt good about it. So to hear that was almost an insult to my own instrument, and yet it was like, wow, about the Courtois. And I think that's what I always liked, was then getting it to work, and not only feeling that way sort of soloistically or playing an etude or just warming up on it, but then getting to work and feeling like, just like Mark said, playing something like, all the Wagner we play there, or anything, you play so much on the soft side, and then you have your moments where it's time to let rip, and to be able to do both comfortably, to get that high end, almost that zing on the sound when it's really time for it to come out. It's easy on these instruments, and the way they hold up. So you don't feel like you're ever being held back, at least on my particular, I never feel like I'm held back, or I'm going to overblow it if I'm not careful. It feels like no matter how much I push, it can handle it. But then when I pull it way back, it's like a nice hug.
It's from the massive zing for Wagner to just every day is a nice warm hug.
That's a nice hug. These are all things you can use on ads from now on.
Yeah, I'll make sure to reach out to you and ask about, if I need to get a copyright or anything like that for future ads. So yep. Appreciate that.
It's
like the most beautiful thing you've ever said, Jeremy.
Took me being out of work for 7 months to.
You're a poet.
So what I think is super interesting is within the church story is that swap of the two horns between the two of you. When we, valves, when you get into the valve conversation, there's so many different angles to look at it. There's a standard rotor, which has its benefits and drawbacks, maybe of a little bit more resistance than some like. And then you have the Thayer, which is pretty much full throttle all the time. And then you have a Hagman, which is kind of in the middle there. And something a lot of people may not know about the Hagman valve specifically that I have right here is that Rene Hagman, Courtois was the first OEM manufacturer to partner with Rene Hagman. So the relationship between this valve specifically and the rest of the instrument is really tight. And while that's true for all of our valves, the history there is really, really cool. And the fact that the Thayers we use are a true OE Thayer valve and things like that. So for somebody that went from, a Thayer to a Hagman, what made that decision what kind of forced your hand in that decision? And the same with from like the Green Home from Mark to a Thayer, or a Hagman, I suppose, to a Thayer. Because usually it can sometimes be the opposite. So what is?
Well, I think there'd been, especially like in the 90s and then even in the 2000s, there had been that drive to play on bigger instruments, bigger mouthpieces, bigger valves. And I mean, I certainly bought into it. I was in college in the middle of the 90s, and all of a sudden somebody was making an 8 3/4 inch bell, and it was like, oh man, that extra 1/4 inch, oh man, and I have found it interesting and pleasant that there's been sort of a wave crashing back from that now, and you see a lot of musicians, a lot of trombonists using smaller instruments. To hear Jorgen do what he does on a traditional valve closed wrap is just constantly inspiring. and it makes you realize that you don't need to have the biggest instrument, the biggest mouthpiece. I think coming from the Thayer to the Hagman was a nice, I wanted something a little smaller anyway. And I was going to mention at some point that one thing I've been actually working with Ben a little bit over the last year or two is trying to find another instrument or two to complement the Hagman. So when we're playing something lighter or maybe be something like Porgy and Bess, I actually used the traditional valve closed wrap model when we performed Porgy and Bess, just to get that little bit lighter sound, maybe a little more compact than the Hagman gives. But the Hagman was a nice transition from the Thayer to maybe that slightly more traditional valve, but with still being a large enough bore that you don't feel held back at all. And so for me, it was actually a really easy transition. I thought that I would sort of be a Thayer guy forever, just because the ease of airflow and stuff like that. But I feel like with the Hagman, at least for me, I didn't lose any of that or sort of that width of sound, and yet I can also get it a little more compact. So I assume for Mark it was the same, but just reversed.
Yeah. Well, I'm very fortunate to have 3 Courtois at home. I've got the Thayer, the Hagman, and the rotor, and then an alto, and then we have the jazz horn down at work. For me, and it has always been the case, the valve changes. The valve affects every note you play on your instrument. And frankly, I think a valve is a valve most of the time for me in the valve register. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to trigger playing, I don't think there's a enormous difference between the 3 valves for me. They're pretty consistent, but it's the way they color and influence the overall sound of the horn, because every note's going to go through that valve. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's the absolute foremost property, I guess, of that sound influence on a horn of the valve, and the reason to make the choice. Certainly there's just a lot of room, and the target's bigger with Thayer, and the compactness that's really attractive of the of something like the trigger, the rotor. But man, they're all so good in just slightly unique ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'll pick up on something, Jeremy, you mentioned there. You were working with Ben on trying to find some different things. The one really cool thing about, for those tuning in, about the instruments that Mark and Jeremy started on, was that those instruments were not made in the same country that they're being built today in. Originally, these instruments were being built in France, and when the Buffet Group at the time acquired the B&S group of the B&S, Meinl Weston, Hans Hoyer, J. Sterzer, and all of these German brass brands, we shifted the production of those instruments to Germany, where we were building also B&S trombones and the majority of our brass instruments now. So and that was kind of the last couple of years where you guys kind of got in right before the switch. So between what you started on and kind of what you've seen now, what are the differences or maybe uniquenesses from one to the other that you find?
Go for it.
I know that I haven't been able to play nearly as many of the German-made Courtois to offer that strong an opinion. I have to be frank. Mm-hmm. So, and I certainly don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to switch at this point because I'm so happy with mine. But I think that's kind of a work in progress to be able to answer that really truthfully, Declan, for me.
Mm-hmm.
I know we tried out had a chance to play on the New York?
Screwbell, right?
Yep. Yeah, the New York model. That was really nice. And actually, I was surprised that it felt as close to mine as it did. I remember actually a couple of years ago, Pollard was playing on one of them, and I even said something to him, and I asked how much different, how does it feel? And he goes, you almost can't tell a difference, and I didn't expect that to be the case. And so had a chance, I think Mark and I both had a chance to play on it. And I said to Mark, that was one of the few reasons why I wasn't that interested in buying one, was because it felt so much like my Hagman that it was almost like, well, besides the screw off bell, I'd rather find an instrument more different, and so I'm kind of interested to you guys make so many different instruments, valves, combinations, and the sterling silver bell, stuff like that. I just think there's so many different options that it's been something I've always kind of wanted to do, was experiment a little bit within the section based on the different operas. I mean, I think our setup is really ideal for I think we can get by with any type of style, but I feel like there's certain things where maybe a little lighter sound on top or a little more compact, kind of like, so when we've gone down, I think Mark did kind of a similar thing on, was it Pasquale a couple years ago, where you kind of all sized down a little bit. So just finding different sounds for different, periods. I don't think we have our collection sort of, done yet, but trying to find maybe a different combination of even having a couple different bells and slides where I can, have a couple different combinations that we can kind of go back and forth and just finding different sounds. But I think the thing that I've always enjoyed was it doesn't feel like, even when we change things around, it's always the same feel to the section, and we don't lose our balance and blend. It doesn't really change the sort of maybe section sound that we've sort of developed over time. And so it always still feels like home, regardless of what instruments we're playing. But I can't say I've played a ton of them, but the New York one was really, really nice. And I before this, I remember talking to Ben right before the pandemic hit about trying one of the new French ones that they're let's call it what that model is.
Yes.
Paris model.
Yep.
So yeah, eager to try that one as well.
Mm-hmm. I can promise you that we're gonna work on that during the pandemic. We're trying to build up. I have a nice little arsenal of horns that I'm building up now that I can kind of start playing around with soon, hopefully. So I'll definitely be in contact with both of you about that in the near future. So we're on the downward slope of our time here. So again, I want to thank you, gentlemen, both for being here. We're not done just yet. We've got a couple more things to just chat about. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that we talked way at the beginning of this about practice time and some days being great, some days being not so great. Mark, for you are not only a very accomplished trombone player, but also a fantastic euphonium player as well. For those that tuning in who've not listened to his album Eufish, after you listen to this whole interview, and then after you stop what you're doing after that to listen to the Chicago Trombone Consort album, once you're done after that, then you have to listen to that album all in a row. So how's euphonium practice been?
Oh, it's still maybe my favorite practice. I start every day on that instrument. I think it's somehow reacquainting myself with how to ride the bike every day. I start back on the first bike I ever rode, just because it brings everything back sooner and quicker. So yeah, I love my half-hour warm-up on the Euf every morning before I start changing directions. I'm still playing a Hirschbrenner, which of course is a classic now because they're not made anymore, and that's probably one of the best euphoniums I've ever played. Still, is the one I have. However, I am definitely thirsty to get a Besson home for a while and shake it down as well and try some solo pieces on it. And I know that it's just not a good time to try instruments right now and give each a chemical bath afterwards. So yeah, I know there's a Besson with my name on it here in Chicago out at Quinlan Fabish Music. So I'll get out there whenever the time is right. Great new horns.
The cello of the band.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sure that I can find a couple things with your name on it to get over to you soon. So
Beautiful.
I'll be in contact about that as well. So with the last couple of minutes here, if anybody has any last questions to chime in, please soon. But for on the horizon for the both of you, you know, I know things are still really in a tough spot. You know, Chicago, like we said, many of the big, you know, cities that are more condensed are still going through a lot of this tough pandemic related issues. So, you know, for on the horizon for both of you, what kind of cool things that you have coming up in the future?
Well, for me, I think it's, you know, planning maybe over what could be another year of having theaters and concert halls closed, you know, to consider the idea that our industry may be amongst the very last to return to their full life, along with, you know, maybe theaters and sporting venues, you know, those unfortunately are probably going to be the last things to return to normalcy just because of their size and
Mm-hmm.
what the lawmakers will allow in terms of crowd sizes and so on. So I think it's going to be, unfortunately, quite a while yet. But what comes with time is the ability to think and plan and create. So for me, it's probably going to be more teaching stuff. I'm thinking of writing a book, but I don't know if that's going to happen. If I have a year more to do it, then it's maybe a possibility. And just to get more very long time concepts down to pen and paper and get them out there for maybe public consumption, and maybe also to try to create more teaching and performing opportunities abroad once I can travel again. And I think that hopefully will come as a result of some of the teaching I'm doing and meeting new people in more different places. Hopefully that'll provide a footprint to eventually travel and do more of that stuff.
That's awesome. A book would be great.
Yeah, we'll see.
Jeremy, what about you?
You know, it's kind of tough looking at it because the future is so uncertain for everybody. You know, obviously there are some orchestras that are capable of based on state and local laws, are doing, you know, chamber concerts and stuff like that. And then I think there's just enough groups, us certainly in the Met, the New York Phil now have all canceled, you know, through the end of the full season. So yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to know what comes next there. So I think it's, you know, for me, just trying to sort of, I don't know. I think I'm eager. I'm excited enough to get back that I always keep that in my mind. In some ways, some of the practice I've done this year has been different enough where I feel like I've learned little things that I don't think I would have learned. Because I live in a high-rise apartment building. When we got down on lockdown from basically March 16th for 6-7 weeks, I practiced with nothing but a practice mute, and I've done almost all summer with, I mean, only practicing with a practice mute, just because we're all locked in the building together, and no reason to piss off all my neighbors all the time, and I'm not preparing for anything that I'm playing anyway. I'm just sort of playing to play and to stay in shape and to enjoy it. And it's actually helped a couple of things that I don't think I would have thought or expected, playing with a practice muted all the time. You know, you pick up little things that you're doing differently with the air when there's that much resistance on it. So I guess in a way, I was thinking about my slurring. I'm like, you know, I might come out of this with a better slur than you know, I obviously the timing of my teaching stopping, you know, about in March, it's kind of unfortunate. I hope to get a chance to kind of start to do more of that again, but there aren't a whole lot of open teaching positions right now, and it's certainly not, no one's really hiring anything. Mm-hmm. I actually started, I told Mark, and Mark actually helped me out with this. With all this free time, I'm actually started taking the courses to get out my real estate license here in Illinois. So it was just thinking of something to do with my free time and maybe something to do, like actually doing some work starting in January, February. But it being something that down the road I could do part-time on the side of whatever we get to go back to.
Yeah.
Because it's so sad that it's as uncertain as it is. And some of it is, certain orchestras that were already in financial difficulties. I think now it's been exacerbated by this pandemic. Audience participation, how comfortable people are going to be going back to concerts when it's time. I feel like people that like going to concerts are going to be dying to go back to concerts, but I think there's also people that are skeptical about that, and I could see sort of both sides of it. But I'd like to believe that when it's safe to fill up concert halls again, people are going to want to do it. And I think all of us with full-time positions, even though Lyric is not, our timing is different around the year than a lot of full-time gigs, hope that what we go back to is similar enough to what we left. There's just no way to know now. And so, yeah, sitting around and kind of thinking, what can I do with myself besides playing with a dog all day? And so
you can do that.
Right, and I've done really well with that. But yeah, I just was sort of thinking something to do. And so all of a sudden now I'm sitting around studying, which I can't say I've really done since high school. Since, if you go to college on the trombone, I can't say I really studied books much. And so I'm sitting there studying and have to take exams. And I'm like, oh my God, but it's kind of something to do. And maybe in the meantime, and then hoping that things come back and are close enough to what they were. And just, so just kind of trying to stay busy. Stay occupied, stay optimistic.
I think that's a lot of us can do it at the moment. And I really look forward to seeing a concert again. Oh. Like I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to. And yeah. I mean, just from that to just shows and not having an interview having to be over Zoom, that sounds like it's going to be really cool when we get to do things like that. So
definitely.
Even watching movies where people are in crowded concerts and in clubs, and you're like, no, don't do that. And it could be a movie that was filmed 10 years ago. Like, I'm so looking forward to seeing groups of people together and not having an anxiety attack over whether they're going to get sick.
Yeah.
So yeah, here's hoping that comes sooner than later.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at the end of our time now, and I am so happy that we finally got to do this through no technical difficulties, and we got to sit down because I really, really enjoyed it.
That's fun.
I hope you too did as well. And I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. I have not, I wish nothing but the best going forward for both of you. And of course, if there's anything that can be done, that I may be able to help with, just let me know. And if anybody has any remaining questions, just chime them in there, and we make sure to adjust them later on, and I'll get some answers for you. So again, to the both of you, thank you so much for being here, and it's been a pleasure. So a quick reminder.
Thank you, Declan.
Thank you. And a quick reminder to everybody that's tuning in right now, next Thursday, right back here, 2 p.m. Eastern time, for Caroline Hartig, professor of clarinet at The Ohio State University, talking about the R13 and ICA. So it's going to be a really cool time, and please check it out. So thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Declan.
Take care.
Yep.